What's up, everybody? This is Alex Christoforou with the Duran, and I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran, and today we're going to be discussing the interview with George Papadopoulos. All right, Alexander, George Papadopoulos has surfaced, and he gave an interview on Hannity. He went to The View. He's making his rounds on TV, and he's telling his story. And it doesn't really say much, actually. I mean, he's been sentenced to 14 days in prison, and he pretty much is just saying, I really didn't know anything. What do you think about the story that he's telling to Hannity and to The View and to other media outlets?
Right. There's two important things to say about Papadopoulos. I mean, there's three important things to say about Papadopoulos. Firstly, the FBI are saying that it was because of Papadopoulos that they launched this entire Russiagate investigation. Well, I think anybody listening to Papadopoulos simply, that is nonsense. I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous because, what Papadopoulos is saying is absolutely true. I mean, he had some discussions with the Russians. He was trying to set up a meeting between Trump and Putin. He was absolutely crazy to think that he was the man to conduct an international diplomacy in that way. I mean, doing Henry Kissinger stuff, but clearly that's what he thought he was doing. But nothing that he did in terms of his contacts with broke any law. So, I mean, and there is no evidence of collusion there. And he said himself, he doesn't know anything about any collusion. So clearly there's no collusion with Papadopoulos. But the thing that really is coming out, and which I think is very, very serious and very sinister, is that he was the target by the FBI and the US intelligence community. And I'm guessing perhaps other intelligence agencies as well, Australia, Britain, who knows? They were clearly baiting him. They were trying to trip him up. They were trying to trick him into saying things that would implicate the Trump campaign in collusion. And frankly, that is extremely bad. Remember, this was going on during a presidential election. And it seems that the intelligence agencies of certain Western powers, including the United States, were interfering in the election by trying to induce a Trump campaign operative into basically acting as if he was colluding with Russia. That is an extraordinarily important thing, and in my opinion, an explosive one.
And it's completely corroborated with Carter Page's experience as well. Both men pretty much went through a copy-paste scenario as to how they were baited, even in the same city.
Exactly.
In the same city, the same people, and they were baited to try and throw Trump under the bus and to try to create, this plan B that we see that are surfacing in the text messages between Strzok and Page, the insurance plan to destroy Trump's presidency.
Exactly.
And so let's get into some of these characters that were baiting Papadopoulos as well as Carter Page. And some of these guys are pretty mysterious. And, going back to the game of Clue, it's the professor. So we have Mr. Professor Mifsud, this mysterious guy that's vanished. What's going on with this guy?
Well, I would love to know, actually, because he has vanished off the face of the earth, and people don't just vanish. I mean, they hide. But, I simply cannot believe that a Maltese professor, a former diplomat, can really hide from the CIA and the FBI and the US intelligence community. I mean, maybe Osama bin Laden could, but Professor Mifsud? It seems inconceivable. I mean, this is a very strange business. And, and now we're hearing rumors that this man may be dead. Where are these rumors coming from? Because he's disappeared? I mean, this whole thing seems extremely strange to me and completely beyond explanation. And I have to remind our viewers that there have been rumors that Professor Mifsud has some kind of contacts with British intelligence, and the reports about that seem to be rather more concrete than the speculations that he was involved with the Russians, with Russian intelligence in any way. He was involved with the Valdai Forum, but as far as one can see, he didn't have any intelligence connections. And none of the people, so far as one can tell, that Papadopoulos had dealings with, who he was introduced to by Mifsud, were Russian intelligence operatives either.
Are we seeing a circle of spies for hire, hired guns in the UK and in London, being hired by the FBI and DOJ to, in this case, to take down Trump? And these spies, were baiting Carter Page and Papadopoulos and all these guys?
Well, in a word, yes. I mean, the Cambridge professor. He's an obvious example. Stephen Halper. He's clearly. He was paid. They called him an informer, but the way Papadopoulos describes him, he's not an informer. He is a provocateur. He comes along and engages in straightforward provocation tactics. That's what Papadopoulos is describing. That is what Carter Page is describing. So, we're provocation tactics there. We have Christopher Steele. Well, maybe he wasn't engaged in those kind of provocation tactics. Though I doubt that we've actually got to the bottom of all the activities that Christopher Steele was involved in. But certainly he was a paid informer of the FBI. Now, that was denied at one time. But we now know that he was actually paid by the FBI. And we know that the FBI continued through Bruce Orr to have contacts with him, even after they formally sacked him. So, this is all very, very, very strange. And it's not just, of course, the intelligence agencies that seem to have been using these spies for hire, but, of course, it was Fusion GPS and the DNC also, because it was they who were paying Christopher Steele. So something very murky was going on in London. We haven't got anywhere close to the bottom of it, but we're getting dribs and drabs of information coming out all the time.
And it seems that these guys profiled, when you look at Carter Page and Papadopoulos, they're almost like the same profile of young men, guys that are very ambitious, maybe a little naive about the workings of the world and how sinister things can really be in politics. And they're just looking to try and get ahead and, like you said, create deals. Papadopoulos wasn't even an expert in Russia. He's actually an expert in energy in Egypt.
Well, exactly.
So he's not even an expert in Russia. Yeah. And so these guys, Steele, Halper, Mifsud, are they working for like MI6? Is there like a formal connection here between the FBI and British intelligence? Or is this very much under the radar? Is this like a different world of spy games that now we're just opening our eyes to?
Right. I think the first thing to say is that there is a very formal connection between US intelligence and British intelligence. They not only cooperate with each other closely, but they are very much linked with each other. GCHQ, which is the British equivalent of the NSA, is connected to the NSA through something that's called the Five Eyes. It's a huge surveillance network system. And what Edward Snowden basically revealed is that the NSA, because it is not allowed to listen into some things that US citizens do, was getting GCHQ, British GCHQ, to do it for them. So there is a very, very close and very, very formal connection between British intelligence, US intelligence, and Australian intelligence, which some people are also saying might have been involved in some form in all of this. So, we need to be quite clear about that. Now, what was the role of all of these people? Well, as I said, we know about some people. We know that Halper was definitely paid by US intelligence, by the FBI, and previously by the CIA. We know that. It's a public fact. We know that Christopher Steele was a paid informant of the FBI. We don't yet have any real information about Joseph Mifsud. And this is really serious because Mifsud looks as if he is the actual key figure in at least the Papadopoulos side of the story. And of course, what he said to Papadopoulos about the Russians having lots of emails about Clinton. By the way, I'm sure those were not the DNC emails. I'm sure those were the emails. What he was referring to were the emails that Hillary Clinton had on her own private server. But that looks to me actually like a provocation of the same kind that Halper was engaging in. And of course, if Mifsud was involved in a provocation, then it looks as if Papadopoulos was trapped.
Has Papadopoulos officially, this revelation of listening to Papadopoulos and tell his story that he was indeed baited and trapped, is the collusion, the Mueller collusion, Russia thing, is that officially 100% done? I mean, it's blown apart.
To my mind, when you say done, to my mind, it never existed, because I've never seen any evidence that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And frankly, I mean, not only have I seen no evidence of it, I mean, it was just an absurd idea, and it should have been absurd right from the first moment. But if you are talking about the legal investigation, which is what Robert Mueller is all about, then I think it is absolutely clear that he has drawn a blank. I think something that people are repeatedly missing is that when that indictment came out a few weeks ago of those 13 Russians who were supposed to have hacked the DNC, Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general, who's Mueller's boss, actually gave a press conference in which he said no US citizens were involved. Now, the original collusion allegation was that the Trump campaign and the Russians colluded over the DNC hack with the Trump campaign people telling the Russians what to hack and what to leak. Now, Rosenstein has already said that didn't happen. Now, that doesn't seem to be registering with people, but I mean, we've had it from Rosenstein himself, so there's no need to speculate about it anymore. I don't think this investigation is any more about collusion. I think the collusion thing collapsed months ago. I think that the FBI and Mueller gave up on it last October when they grudgingly admitted to the the House Intelligence Committee that the Steele dossier, the Trump dossier, the thing that Christopher Steele put together, which was the key evidence of collusion, that they couldn't verify it, and it probably wasn't true. So I think you're right. I think it's collapsed. I think that Mueller is investigating other things. I'm not sure what he is investigating, by the way, and I'm not sure why his investigation is still continuing, given that he was supposed to be looking into collusion. But that is not the real scandal. The collusion didn't happen. That is not the real scandal. The real scandal is the way the US intelligence agencies behaved during the election. And now we see clear evidence of provocation tactics by what look like British and American and possibly Australian intelligence officers during the election campaign towards Trump operatives like Papadopoulos and Carter Page. And anybody who cares about democracy in America should be really concerned about this.
So to finish it up, what's next for Carter Page and Papadopoulos now that it seems like their part in this play is now coming to a finality? So now people know exactly what was going on with these two guys, which is basically nothing. And are we ever going to see Steele, Mifsud, and Halper? We've talked about this before. Are we ever going to see them testify to Congress, to the Senate, to the American people? Are we ever going to see these three guys on TV telling everyone what the hell they were doing in London?
Well, let's come back to Papadopoulos and Carter Page first. I mean, they're victims. Let's just be quite clear about this. I mean, Papadopoulos has only been to prison for 14 days, but he's got a criminal conviction now. I mean, that is a terrible thing for a man who was acting a young man, I would add. He's about 30, completely out of his depth. He didn't know what he was doing. He was, as you correctly said before, these were young, enthusiastic amateurs. They came in, they thought they would be Henry Kissinger, they thought they would be Zbig Brzezinski. They were nowhere near in that kind of league, and they got into all kinds of messes, and it was the intelligence agencies that drew them into those messes. So, I mean, they're victims. In my opinion, Papadopoulos should be pardoned. I hope eventually Trump does the right thing by him and pardons him. And I think they should be compensated. I think both Carter Page and Papadopoulos should be financially compensated for the disaster that's been wreaked upon them. I think they deserve nothing less. I'm not sure how that's going to be done. Maybe they have rights to bring civil claims. I'm not sure. But sooner or later, an apology should be given to them, and they should be financially compensated. As for what will happen to these characters, Halper, Steele, Mifsud, well, of course they should testify before Congress. Of course they should be asked to explain what they did. We've discussed already that it's mysterious that Steele has never been called to testify before Congress in spite of the court cases he's been involved in. It's amazing that Halper hasn't so far been. And as for Mifsud, well, of course, he's vanished. So that begs so many questions. So, I mean, I just don't know where to start. It's the most sinister fact about the whole affair. I would add something. If Mifsud was hiding somewhere in Russia or China or wherever, I still would have thought by now that the CIA and the FBI would have found him. I do not believe that a man like that can just vanish. It doesn't happen in the modern world.
Yeah, and these guys, I think they had Carter Page and Papadopoulos, they had them targeted right from the beginning. They had These guys profiled.
Well, of course they did. I mean, that's exactly what happened. And I mean, if I may say so, I mean, I just want to talk about one little thing, because, of course, one of the things that the FBI have said is that, the reason they opened Russiagate is because they were getting all these reports from the Australian ambassador about things that Papadopoulos had said when he was pretty girls around him, and I think it was the Hilton Hotel in London, about the Russians having Mifsud having told him that the Russians had all these emails. Now, I never believed that story. We now know that isn't true, because, as I said, Halper seems to have been active well before that event. But it seems to me that that story about Papadopoulos having been the start of the whole affair shows the extent to which this whole affair was confected. Because all the things that Papadopoulos was doing with the Russians, let's be absolutely clear about this, he was doing openly. He was reporting about them to the Trump campaign. He was sending emails backwards and forwards, which anybody could read. And he wasn't making any secret of what he was doing, nor were the Russians making any secrets of what he was doing. As we said, he was bragging in front of the Australian ambassador, in front of pretty girls. There was no kind of secret activity going on. But clearly, he was under surveillance, and one would love to know by whom, possibly British intelligence, since a lot of this seems to have happened in Britain. And he was being baited by these spies for hire, as you call them. And that is a very ugly and very disturbing thing.
Professional spies with decades of experience.
Well, decades of experience. I mean, in the case of Halper, he goes all the way back to the 1970s. We're talking about a veteran, an intelligence veteran, and a very experienced one. And I have to say, I mean, when you see the way he operated, I mean, it's very interesting, actually, to see how an agent like that goes about his business. And I mean, he did it, it seems, it's in a very aggressive way, in a rather scary way. I mean, he didn't just bait Papadopoulos, he scared him also.
Yeah, never make a trip to London and talk about missing emails, that's for sure. You never know who's listening. Absolutely. Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much for a great discussion on Papadopoulos. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on the notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. And visit the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt, help support the Duran. And Alexander, people can go down to the description and they can donate to our PayPal page so we can continue to do these broadcasts. It helps us out a lot and we really appreciate it. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Until next
Thank you.
time, take care.